this also doesn't take them out of the realm of out of the possibility of trading for a QB.
Who would they trade for, though?
I'll give you a name right now. Winston.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Johnny Montalbano. This is another edition of Moving the Goalposts. You can follow us across social media at MTGP ETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network at ETB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart, Johnny at Montalbano NY. And you can't follow him anywhere else because he hasn't discovered the other social. He hasn't discovered Instagram or TikTok yet. But so if you want Johnny, you have to follow his Twitter.
Yeah.
You can
I'll tell you, long story short, I've given up on Instagram after being hacked multiple times. So if somebody wants to run my account, if somebody on the network wants to run my account on Instagram, you have my authority to do so.
Or you can follow me on TikTok at NickDmart6 or on Instagram at Nick.DiMartino.9. Yep, that's it. I almost forget it. So
it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. So you can follow us across social media. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to Moving the Goalposts wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to like and subscribe. And this podcast is presented by Playback. Stay tuned for later in the show to find out more. So it's been a pretty eventful week with quarterback injuries. It was a great week. Just an observation. It was a great weekend for the NFL. I mean, like, college football was a huge, and we'll get into college football. College football was just like a huge, it wasn't like a light week in college football. It was a huge week in college football, and that was a huge talk of the town. Now it feels like nobody even cares about it anymore after the NFL slate of games we had yesterday. Now, admittedly, the really bad thing is that there's a whole lot of injuries, quarterback injuries, namely the Joe Burrow injury. And I am just, look, I feel terrible for Bengals fans, and I think it's bad for the NFL when the best quarterbacks get injured. I think that's just bad for the sport. I feel like it's uniquely bad in football because the NFL in particular, because in the NFL without good quarterbacks can be unwatchable. You can have the best receivers, the best running backs, the best defensive players all playing in a game. And if the quarterbacks are bad, the product is bad. And, the NFL is a better place when the big four quarterbacks are all healthy. And, some great players are injury prone and others aren't. I think some quarterbacks are just better at avoiding injury than others, and some are just surrounded by terrible teams, terrible offensive lines. And, the comparison that we keep seeing with Joe Burrow is he the next Andrew Luck? And I really see that on some level. I really do. I really see that. I think that, no, I don't think he is. But I see the comparison. Like, I don't think his career is going to go the same. Andrew Luck played in the NFL for exactly 7 seasons. Isn't that crazy to think, by the way? Andrew Luck only played for 7 years. It feels like he played for like 15 or 20. Like, it feels like he was around forever. But yeah, he only played for 7 years. This is now Josh Allen's 7th year. That's hard to believe, too. This is actually Joe Burrow's 6th season.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of things to get to with this Joe Burrow injury and why I think it's so bad for the NFL. But yeah, I just wanted to hear some of your thoughts on this because I think this is just such bad news for the league.
It's bad news for the league, but I'll tell you right now, if you're the Bengals, if I was a Bengals fan, I would be furious at my front office because what they have in all the years that Burrow's been in the league, as Burrow's been banged up. He's been dealing with some significant injuries over his career, and pretty much a lot of it, if not all of it, is due to the fact that his offensive line doesn't protect him. It's all. I mean, you can almost use any verbiage you want. You could say it's criminal, it's organizational malpractice, even if you think about it, you've got an unbelievable quarterback in Burrow. You've got a dynamic receiving duo, and you've had for years with Jamar Chase, his LSU buddy, and T. Higgins. You've got a pretty good running back there in Brown. For a while, you had a pretty good tight end play as well. So your offensive weaponry has been superb, but you have not been able to get an offensive line to protect Burrow, and your defense has been outside of Hendrickson, and you've got to decide if you can, and you have to figure out if you're going to be able to extend him, if this is going to be his last year there, the one good player you have on that defense. It's awful, Nick. The numbers that Burrow's put up year over year, you could have made the case he could have won Offensive Player of the Year last year with the numbers that he had. I almost would compare it to a starting pitcher in baseball that had an under 500 record and his ERA was under 2. That's how amazing Joe Burrow was last year, and he rallied that team to get them to 500 and to play relevant football until week 18 last year. That's how dynamic he's been. Now, there's a few factors that we can talk into with this going forward with the Bengals, but I would say that to compare him to Andrew Luck, I almost could compare I could compare him in this way, the organizations, because just like with Luck, the offensive line wasn't great for him, and Joe Burrow, the offensive line has been nothing short of terrible in all the time he's been there. I mean, what did he have? He had a torn ACL, MCL, PCL. He had a wrist injury. He's had now multiple leg injuries. This one at first when I saw this happen live, because I was out watching the game on Sunday, it looked like it could have been Achilles. It could have. It ended up being turf toe, which is a very significant thing.
What even is turf toe? I've never heard of that until Joe Burrow.
Well, I've heard of it before, but this is pretty significant when they're talking about the fact that he needs surgery and he's going to be out 3 months.
Yeah. But what is turf? What exactly is it? Do you know?
It's funny. I've heard of it all the time, but I don't know it's specifically what it is. So it's an injury to the big toe joint, specifically a sprain of the MTP joint. And it occurs when the ligaments, tendons, and soft tissues in the joint stretch or tear, often due to hyperextension of the toe. So they're talking about the symptoms include severe pain, swelling, difficulty to move the toe, which if you saw him, he went down and he had to be helped off the field. And they were showing him going back into the locker room that he was being helped off into the locker room. So it didn't look good at first at all. So you were basically holding your breath there if you were Bengals fans. Now, so he's going to be out until December. So it's fortunate that it's not a season-ending injury, but he's going to be out an extreme length of time.
Yeah, and that changes, and that's just terrible. It almost ends the Bengals season, most likely.
See, that's what I want to get to, because
you don't think it does.
I don't, and I'll tell you why. Jake Browning went in there 2 years ago when Joe Burrow got hurt, and he actually showed that he can play. Now, he had what did he have? Like 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions when he went in on Sunday. But Jake Browning has proved that he can step in there and play. Now, is he going to put up Joe Burrow numbers? No. Is he going to put up numbers that you can get by with? Yes. And this also doesn't take them out of the realm out of the possibility of trading for a QB.
Who would they trade for, though?
I'll give you a name right now. Winston. You put Jameis Winston behind that with those receivers. Look what he did. Look what he did in Cleveland with much less talent than what the Bengals did. You don't think he can go in there and give you something? Now, the problem you're going to run into with the Bengals is, and we're going to get through this throughout the course of the episode, is you now have multiple teams now with quarterback injuries.
Yeah, a lot of teams with quarterback injuries, although I think this has to be by far the most significant. I mean, yes, J.J. McCarthy is going to be out for a couple of weeks. Jaden Daniels just had an MRI because he has an issue with his knee, but we don't even know if he's going to miss any time. Here's the problem with the Bengals. The thing is that we keep talking on and on about how inept the is otherwise outside of Joe Burrow. and the receiving core. Like obviously Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, but we keep talking about how inept the team is. I mean, look at how bad their defense was last season and just how badly run they are. But, Joe Burrow is like the one saving grace. Now, none of that changes, but except you have Jameis Winston in your hypothetical scenario or Jake Browning and, instead of Joe Burrow, who's one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the league, not even really arguably. So that's another issue because look at how much they struggled even with Joe Burrow, like last season, for instance, and they didn't even make the playoffs. So, when everything else stays the same and you have such a big downgrade at quarterback, that's obviously going to be a big issue. Even though I do think that Jake Browning and Winston are both serviceable quarterbacks. The other issue is that he's out for 3 months, right? So in December, he comes back.
That's what they're talking about, right?
That's the timeline as of now, at least.
Mm-hmm. So he can come back down the stretch.
So here are a couple of teams that they're going to have to play the Lions go on the road at home, go on the road against the Packers. Next week, go on the road and play Denver, but we'll get into Denver. I don't think they're a great team, but the quarterback is going to make a huge difference against a team like the Broncos, who I think the Broncos are an average team. And the Bengals, even with Joe Burrow, sometimes struggle against average teams. So if you have a big downgrade at quarterback, that's going to be an issue. Same thing with the Steelers. The Jets, that's probably an easy win. They're going to have to play the Steelers twice without Joe Burrow now. And then they're going to have to play the Ravens and then the Bills, most likely without Joe Burrow. So it might not affect things that much because those games you can maybe scratch in as losses anyway. But I mean, so not so much the really good teams, but the average, like the teams that are kind of good, kind of okay, like the Steelers, the teams like the Steelers and the Broncos. That can make a really big difference. So I think that's going to make a really big difference for the Bengals in some of these matchups. Because, now you're playing, the Lions, but like when they play, they're going to go play the Lions and the Packers and the Ravens, who they always play tough, and the Bills, who they also always play tough. I mean, you could almost scratch those in as losses now when maybe they would have had a shot when I think they would have had a pretty good chance with Joe Burrow. I mean, the Bengals, they always play the Bills stuff. They always play they almost beat the Ravens twice last year. And that's because they had Joe Burrow. So I think that's going to make a really, really big difference for the Bengals. It doesn't mean the season's over. It doesn't mean that they can't still make the playoffs because the AFC is just not top. They're very top heavy, but they're not very deep. It's a very shallow conference. I mean, outside of the division, outside of like Buffalo, Kansas City, and Baltimore, I just don't think this conference really is all that deep. I mean, Houston's all right, but I think that they're just in a weak division, so they'll be okay. But I don't know how good even they are. So that's I guess something that the Bengals have going for them. What I would say that the NFL really doesn't have going for them is that the AFC just looks increasingly weak right now, I would say. I mean, the Dolphins have been bad. Denver has not looked good compared to what they were going to look like. So I think it's just going to be an issue with the NFL, and we don't know what Cincinnati's going to look like without Burrow.
Well, the other thing, too, is with this conversation, Nick D, is the fact that the Bengals are 2-0. And I tweeted that out at Montalbano and Y after the game Sunday. Even with the injury, I think the fact that they got to 2-0, even if it wasn't so pretty, is such a big deal for them mentally after the slow starts they've had the last couple of years. I think in those matchups, though, the divisional games are going to be huge because it could come down to a situation. I still think at the end of the day, I still think the Ravens are going to take off and they're going to win this division. But if you're talking about a playoff positioning situation for the Bengals, those divisional matchups and stuff and those matchups against the playoff caliber teams is what's going to be very, very important for them. So the fact that they get off to the 2-0 start, even if it's not as pretty, I think is a very, very big deal when talking about this. So it does give Jake Browning a little bit of leeway into this. Like, let's say if they would have lost that game against the Jaguars, which almost happened up until the very end. If they lost that game against the Browns, which they almost did, I mean, yeah, like I'm saying, this wasn't like it was a pretty 2-0. But at the end of the day, 2-0 is 2-0, and that is a big deal for them. Yeah. I think if they're not 2-0, maybe this is a different story, and maybe you're talking about them having a little bit more urgency going out there and making a trade for a QB.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. I want to get to your Giants.
Sure.
They lose
this week.
That was, I mean, I was impressed at how well their offense looked. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, there's a lot to take away from this game, to be honest with you. And I think I told you guys before, these are the kind of games the Giants are going to play this year. You know, obviously this was much better than week 1 when they looked just lethargic on offense. But, I mean, we can finally stop talking about Jackson Dart, the overreaction to putting Dart in after week 1. I mean, my goodness. You know, there's a few things, though, to take from this because it wasn't all pretty. I mean, obviously the defense didn't play that great. Offensively, they struggled in the beginning. You know, Andrew Thomas not being there, he just continues to show how much they miss him. I mean, that guy, and I can't think of his name because it was so bad, but how about that? How about on that opening drive, 4 penalties by the same player?
James Hudson, I think is his name.
James Hudson, yes. He was so bad I can't even remember his name. That's how bad it was. But you have 5 penalties on the opening drive, including the kickoff return, that most of them negate positive plays. And, you know, you put together an 8 or 9 minute drive, results in a field goal. All right, but you know what, though? You moved the ball, held the ball for a while, kept Dak off the field in the beginning. But almost, you know, you go back and look at that. They also had a situation where late in the game, 4th and 2, instead of kicking a field goal, they go for it, don't make it. Big deal because then the Cowboys come back down and score. But, you know, offensively, there were some things you liked. Wan'Dale Robinson looked really good. Cam Scatterbo showed he had some good runs. Malik Neighbors, they got him the ball more. He wanted the ball more. They got him the ball more. But so, I mean, there are things you liked. There's some things that you didn't like. Obviously, you know, not being able to hold the lead. I think they showed also that I think Brandon Aubrey was the first kicker to kick a field goal as time expired in regulation and kick one right at the end of overtime as time expired. But and it hurts, though. I mean, obviously, because it's the Cowboys, too. It's a divisional It's a divisional opponent. It's against a team that I still don't think is that great in the Cowboys. But you know, people are talking already about, you know, the fact that this team's dysfunctional and stuff. I'm sorry, if you watch the game, this didn't look like a team that was dysfunctional. It looked like a team that still has a ways to go. But I'm sorry, this didn't look like the team of week 1 or any point last year. It showed you that they have pieces. It does show you that they have a lot of work they have to do. And it also shows you that the schedule is torturous. Like we're going to continue to talk about week after week on this show and every show here on the network. But it's painful because it was the Cowboys and Russell Wilson had a career game and you had a lot of great things that end up at the end of the day a loss.
Yeah. I mean, that Russell Wilson played a really good game. There's no doubt. He played a better game than even your biggest Giants optimist would have predicted that he would have had. Nobody, I don't think any, even your most optimistic Giant fan, and there's a whole lot of Giant fans who are bootlickers of the team. I don't think any of them would have said he was going to throw 450 yards and go for 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. There's no way anybody would have like if you had said that, you'd be like, okay, you're crazy. There's no way that's going to happen. So in terms of how he played, he was great. Now that last throw in overtime, that interception that he threw, that was a terrible play. I don't know who that was to. It almost looked like the receiver ran the wrong route. It was so bad. Like there was no Giant receiver in sight. I didn't know who that was even to. And so obviously that was a problem. I mean, look, at the end of the day, they played well, but they still lost. And now that's going to have I think it has a psychological impact on the team. And in an NFC that is so competitive, it's just going to hurt them a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think you can talk about the Giants and the playoffs with the team they've got and the matchups that they have. I mean, it would have been nice to get this one, but I'm not as I'm hurt by it. I'm hurt by it for a multitude of reasons, but it's nice though because I don't have to hear the talking point now about Jackson Dart. Which, and if you read Saturday, Schefter came out with an article Saturday that says that there's no sense of urgency into the Giants until the Giants bringing Dart in, and I think that's absolutely the right call. You look at the schedule they've got here, and you look at this offensive line, which is still a problem, by the way. That does not go away with this game. You want to put him out there for what reason? What's the purpose of putting Dart in this early? What, for a shakeup? They don't do that, and it's not a surprise. I mean, again, I spoke about this last week. Brian Daboll doesn't rush, doesn't make changes like this right away. And if you look at the schedule, I think the last 5 games of the season, and I think about this more and more because at some point Dart's going to get in this year. I'm not saying he's not going to get in this year, but bringing him in this early into a season with this offensive line against this schedule makes absolutely no sense.
Right. You're setting him up for failure. And also just the psychological impact of it. It is a lot better to start the older quarterback, or the more experienced quarterback, I should say, with and have if you're unsure, like, all else being equal, obviously, it's better to start the more experienced quarterback, not only so the younger quarterback can learn from him, but also because it's just better if you have to bench the older quarterback and then put in the rookie rather than the other way around, bench the rookie and then put in the older quarterback. It's better for the young quarterback. It's better for the head coach in terms of keeping his job and all that. Like, that's also better. Like, you don't want to. It's part of the reason the Colts started Daniel Jones instead of Anthony Richardson. Like, it would be a lot better if they have to bench Daniel Jones and then put it in Anthony Richardson than put Anthony Richardson out there and then they have to bench him and then put in Daniel Jones. That's a shit show if that happens.
Yeah, and
in terms of what the Giants' schedule looks like, it's a gauntlet. They're playing an 0-2 Chiefs team next week.
Yeah, you think that
an 0-2 Chiefs team? They play the Chiefs and the Chargers back to back. I mean, those two games, those are going to be really tough defenses for the Giants, especially with this offensive line. Now, you were talking about how you don't have to hear about Jackson Dart. For now, you don't. But when Russell Wilson has another dud of a game, which he's going to have, I'm sure he's going to have some good and bad games. Next time he has a bad game, they're going to be talking about Jackson Dart, especially in the hypothetical scenario that you came up with if the Bengals end up trading for Jameis Winston. Then you really be hearing about Jackson Dart.
But that doesn't make any. But Nicky, that doesn't change though if they traded if they traded away Winston because he's QB2. Now, if he's QB3
right.
and Winston gets traded, then it obviously speeds it up. But but by making him QB2, then Winston doesn't have a spot on this roster.
Right. No, I get that. But
Russell goes out there on Sunday night against the Chiefs and he throws for 160. 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Yeah, then the talk about Dart's going to happen. And I'll tell you right now, I'd come on next week and I'd tell you that Dart shouldn't start week 4.
Here's the thing, though. I understand I agree with what you're saying, that like it's better to have Russell Wilson out there, especially from the way he played against Dallas. However, you also have to remember that Brian Daboll's job is kind of on the line. And if Russell Wilson's not looking good, even if you want to blame the offensive line, even if it's not a good idea for the team to put Jackson Dart to put him out there to start him, Brian Daboll will try to save his job and maybe put Jackson Dart out there. Because let's say the Giants just keep losing with Russell Wilson playing terribly. It makes him look really bad when they drafted Jackson Dart to not use him at all and still keep playing Russell Wilson. It's much more likely that he loses his job. That's how Brian Daboll might look at the situation, which is why it's possible he ends up going out there.
Well, that then goes back to the mistake that I told you about before. The mistake was not starting Dart; it was making him QB2.
Right.
Because, like you said, then all the talk now is that he's going to get rushed out there. I'm not saying that at some point that this is not going to happen at some point this year, and it may happen a little bit sooner than I had originally thought. It's just not going to happen this early weeks, like week 4, week 5. Dart's only going to get out there this early, I'll tell you right now, if Russell Wilson gets hurt. And behind this offensive line, that's a possibility at his age and with this offensive line. I mean, think about going up against that Chief defense. The thing I thought about right away Sunday was after the Eagles beat the Chiefs. I'm like, oh, this is great. Here are the Chiefs that played garbage again for the 3rd straight game going back to the end of last season. And now they get to go to MetLife and play the Giants, and they're going to take out their frustrations on them.
Yeah.
So that's what this all boils down to, is the fact that the mistake was not starting Dart. It was making Dart QB2.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with what you're saying. Speaking of giving games away, my God, Denver gave that game away. I mean, you want to talk about the Giants losing this game? Denver gave this game away way worse than the Giants did. I don't know if I've ever seen anything that bad before in terms of giving the game away. Denver was winning that entire game. They should have been able to put it away. But on a missed what was it? A 60? It was a long field goal that was missed. But there was a penalty.
64-yard, I believe.
Yeah, the guy touched the center, which I think happened. And that ended up, and I don't know if you saw it live, but you could see like the Colts mascot like fell over.
Yeah,
when the field goal was missed.
It reminded me of, and I know we're gonna have a few people that are gonna be very upset when I say this, but it reminded me of the double doink by the Bears in the playoffs a few years back. And what I mean by that is the mascot falling. If you go back and watch the replay when the double doink happens and he's like this, he's like excited and he just falls over in disbelief, like almost like he was shot or something. But hey, listen, you know what though, and 2 ways to look at this too. Number one, Colts unbelievable 2-0 start. However way you want to look at it, not punting again. 2nd straight game. They back-to-back games where they don't punt at all. But this one was an absolute shocker to me because going up against what we thought was a great defense. Now Pat Surtain got hurt, missed a couple of plays. They came back in, but we've talked a lot about the Broncos team. When we talk about the Broncos, we talk about Bo Nix on offense, and we talk about their defense. Well, their defense now for the first 2 games this year and the second half of last year has not been that great. I mean, and they have the potential to be an all-world defense. I mean, Pat Surtain's one of the best corners in the sport. This defense, it looks like it's going to be lethal, but they have the potential to be lethal. But they really have not been. I mean, they got to Cam Ward 6 times in the first game, but they still allowed him to make some plays and stuff and kept that game very, very close. And now in this one, you give 29 points. I think the Colts jumped out to a lead, but for the most part, the Broncos were winning this game from start to finish.
Yeah. Can we finally cool off on the Broncos now? Do people not understand do people see what I saw in the Broncos now after these first 2 weeks? They struggled against the Titans, who are one of the 5 worst teams in the league, at the very least. They blow this game against the Colts. I mean, the Colts they're 2-0. They've looked good so far. I don't know how much they're going to keep this up. I never understood the hype around Denver. I think it was just that they're in the same division as the Chiefs, and people are tired of the Chiefs and don't like them and want to believe that Denver is going to end up winning that division. And that was just a really big part of it. I never thought they were that good. They were not that good last year towards the end of the season. And I just don't really buy it with this team. I don't buy it. This was a game that they clearly should have won. It could end up costing them. I think it really is going to end up costing them.
It could be something where, I mean, depending on how the Colts finish and the way this division shapes out later on in the year, absolutely. I mean, if they think about it, they could have had a 2-game lead over the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Now look, we've seen 0-2 teams. People like to say 0-2 is bad, but we've seen 0-2 teams make the playoffs. I mean, the Chiefs were. The Ravens were 0-2 last year, including a bad loss in week 2, and they still turned it around and they got to the divisional round. So, I mean, teams can turn it around at 0-2, especially now with the extra wild card the extra playoff team and the extra wild card in each in each conference. They can turn it around.
Yeah.
This might be a seeding scenario is what you're looking at.
Yeah, like the Chiefs are now 0-2, and I'm not going to overreact to this because I still think the Chiefs are going to win this division. They might not end up getting the number 1 seed. They might not get the bye. All right, fine. But I still think they're going to end up winning this division. Denver doesn't look great. Look, the Chiefs are 0-2. I get it matters that they're 0-2. They also just happened to play the Chargers and the Eagles the first 2 weeks in a row. Like, they just happened to play those two teams back to back. If they had played them at completely separate times and lost both of those games, let's say they had played the Chargers week 1 and then lost to the Eagles in like week 7, they would have ended up losing both those games, but nobody would have really, there wouldn't have been any hype around it because they wouldn't have started the season 0-2. Like you said, the Ravens, they started 0-2 last year and had a loss to the Browns. So I don't really think this is that big of a deal. And especially with the way Denver's been looking, I understand their division is not as easy as it once was, but I just don't think the Broncos or the Chargers hold much of a candle to the Chiefs still. I still don't.
Well, this is getting blown up a little bit more because A, it's the Chiefs. And
yeah.
And 2, I think there are some things with the Chiefs that you are a little bit worried about. They're banged up receiver-wise with a couple of their guys. Their offensive line still has not looked that great. Now, their defense looked better on Sunday, but their offensive line is still showing you concern. And when you look at them, it's something we talked about during the AFC preview. Their schedule is a lot more challenging this year than in years past. Now, they'll play the Giants on Sunday, which seems to be a favorable one. But after the Giants, they play the Ravens, they go to the Jaguars, and then they are home to the Lions. So 2 out of the next 4 games are against pretty good teams that were in the playoffs last year and made pretty deep runs. So I don't know now if you look at this game Sunday for them against the Giants, and, well, I think you do look at it this way. It's a must-win game for them.
Yeah.
If you go to 0-3 and then you got to play the Ravens and you got to go to the Jaguars, which I think looks favorable, but the Jaguars have looked better than the first 2 games, and the Lions, who remember beat them at the start of the year 2 years ago, and it looks like maybe the overreaction to them after week 1. It does feel a little bit different because there's also some uncharted territory. The last time the Chiefs started 0-2.
2014.
Yeah, 2014. So this is different for them. I'm not saying they can't turn this around, but this is the toughest road they've got to face now in all the years under Mahomes and Reed.
Right. But
Kelsey's old, and Kelsey's older too. It was one of his top targets. Look, that was a huge moment in the game on Sunday. Was that throw that Mahomes threw to Kelsey in the end zone, and it went in and out of his hands and went to the Eagle defender. And then the Eagles went down the other way later on and scored. That was a 14-point swing in that game Sunday.
Yeah.
Even Pat Mahomes, as great as he is subject to the in and out of the hands interception. Nobody knows about that more than me when it comes with Eli Manning. But my goodness, that was such a huge turning point, 14-point swing, and the Chiefs never recovered from that. And that's what happens, when you're struggling as you are. You don't get those kind of breaks like you would have in the years past.
Well, the thing is, though, it's like the Chiefs could have won that game. They really could have won that game. They should have won that game, and they just didn't. And it's just that they lost to the Chargers, who they're a better team than, but the better team doesn't always win. They lost to the Chargers last week, and then just this game just happened to be the week right after, leading to them being 0-2. Ultimately, that's really all I think it is. But I do agree with you that it's a concern that they have to go on the road and play the Bills. And I can't tell you how that game's going to go, but the Bills tend to beat the Chiefs in the regular season, and they play at home against the Ravens. They both those games, and that's going to be a big concern, especially with the Bills, because I could see the Bills, I guess the Ravens too potentially, but especially the Bills. If they have the same record, well, the Bills have the tiebreaker against them now, so that can certainly be an issue for the Chiefs. But ultimately, if they end up as like the 2 seed or the 3 seed, to me, like it's not a huge deal compared to like no, they're not the one. They didn't go 15-2 like they did last year. They can still win the Super Bowl even if they're the 3 seed behind the Ravens and the Chiefs and the Bills, especially with the way the Ravens play sometimes in these big spots. It's like I would probably pick the Chiefs to go on the road in Baltimore and beat the Ravens in the playoffs anyway.
Oh, yeah. I'm not doubting you there. I'm just saying that this is the toughest road that they're going to have to face.
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
But let me just say this. If anybody can handle that tough road, it's the Chiefs.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I think that just a lot of this talk is just people who have quote unquote Chiefs fatigue that are hopeful that that their reign of terror is over. Like, that's really just what I think it is. And I really don't think it is. I think the Chiefs right now remind me a little bit of Alabama from 10 years ago. Remember 10 years ago with Alabama, people were like, the Saban dynasty is over. And then what happened? They won 3 more national titles. So look, this to me, and by the way, they had good reasons to think that too, that Saban was going to be less dominant. And guess what? It didn't happen. So I could see a similar type of thing happening here. I think that there was just a lot of overreaction. Moving the goalposts is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, rubbing your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show. One thing I'm not overreacting to is the Jets.
Oh.
They're an embarrassment. I don't have to tell anybody that. Let me just say this. I was at that game. And
any stories from,
and I'm sure you know that I work till 7 a.m. on Sundays, and I didn't even sleep. I literally had no sleep to go to this game and watch it.
Do you have any customer service stories this time?
No. Not really, other than that they closed the bar in like the third quarter, which I don't know if they always do that.
I think I believe that is a typical thing that happens in all these stadiums. I mean, we've seen in baseball where like they stop alcohol sales like in the 7th inning. I think in hockey, it's like the third period, the start of the third period. Basketball, maybe like the start of the fourth quarter. So maybe, I don't think that's much of a surprise. But now, what did you say, third quarter?
I think it was towards the end of the third quarter, and
that sounds about right, because then that'd be about a quarter usually is about 40 to 45 minutes in real time. So
I think that might be a safety reason. I don't even know if it's a safety reason or if it's just a clean up. I wasn't looking to drink alcohol. I just wanted to see if they had an energy drink because I hadn't slept. So that's kind of what I wanted. And it was, first of all, the thing with football is that it's the worst sport to see live, because the thing with going to a baseball game, for instance, the weather's always nice, or usually if it's baseball, the weather's nice. And if it's not nice, if there's rain, for instance, the game doesn't happen. So the weather is never an issue in baseball. So it's an issue in football for much of the year. It wasn't an issue this time. But also in baseball, say I go to a Met game, that's the only baseball game I would have even possibly watched that day. I don't need to watch anything else. The weird thing about going to 1:00 games, which I don't get, the whole season ticket holder thing. Like, there are people with season tickets for some of these teams, and they go to every single game. And I love going to night games and all that because of the environment. And I went to this game because I thought the Jet, and we both said it on the show and on Football Forecast, that the Jets would keep the game close, because the Jets tend to play the Bills tough in MetLife, which they do. They almost beat them last year. They did beat them 2 years ago when Zach Wilson was the quarterback for most of that game after Aaron Rodgers got hurt. I was at that game too. But the thing is that didn't happen. They went a combined 10 for 22 Tyrod Taylor and Justin Fields. And it was an embarrassment. I think in the third quarter at one point, the Jets had a total like 17 yards of offense. It was embarrassing. Justin Fields is terribly inaccurate, but not to just pin it all on him. The Jets receiving core didn't do him any favors. I think that Garrett Wilson, it seemed like he was double teamed for a lot of that game, and he just wasn't open. And outside of Garrett Wilson, the Jets just have nothing.
They don't have enough. That's the thing. They don't have that second guy that scares you right now. So obviously the Bills are gonna, and they had a great connection, those two, Fields and Wilson, in their first game, and the Bills scouted that and they double teamed Wilson, and Wilson they couldn't get him the ball. Whenever they got him the ball, he couldn't really secure it a couple of times. I was really shocked though. I really thought they were going to build up the momentum they had in the first week. I thought the Bills were going to have a little bit of a letdown. Ironically enough, the only team that seemed to have a letdown was the Jets. And I was shocked. You saw also, if you're watching the game on the TV broadcast side, you saw Aaron Glenn get very frustrated, very emotional. And I think you got to be careful with that he doesn't get this emotional all the time. I mean, I know that he cares and stuff like that, but it could get out of hand there. And as we're doing this now, Fields left because he was put in the concussion protocol, and he's still in that as of now. So if he doesn't clear that, then you're going to be having Tyrod Taylor start on Sunday.
Not sure that's such a bad thing.
I think the ship though has sailed on Tyrod Taylor though, being a capable backup though.
You don't think he's? I mean, look, I don't know, but he played better than Fields did.
Well, but the problem though is when he was in there, they were already so far behind. I think the thing though about Fields, and this was they were behind from the get-go, so you knew Fields was going to have to air out the ball more. He didn't really have to throw the ball that much in the first game because he only threw it 22 times, I believe, and he ran it a lot. He used his legs a lot, and maybe that also speaks volume to maybe the Steelers' defense is a little bit overrated too. But I thought with Oliver being out, I really thought that the Jets had a chance to take advantage of that, and I thought the Bills were going to be in for a little bit of a letdown hangover after the unbelievable comeback. But because they were behind from the get-go, Fields had to use more than just the running attack. And like you said, he couldn't pin up with Wilson. They double-teamed him, and they don't have a second guy right now. That's the thing. Rodgers brought it when Rodgers was here. He had his guys, so he knew he had that connection. Fields just doesn't have that.
Breece Hall had the second most receiving yards for the second week in a row. Outside of Garrett Wilson, every single wide receiver and tight end has at most one reception.
Yeah, that's just not.
Everybody else had one reception outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. That's just not going to cut it, especially when your quarterback is Justin Fields, and he is just not accurate enough. I think these guys also just get open. These guys are not this is not a starting receiving core that the Jets have right now. And Justin Fields can't make just routine throws. It's not just that the receiving core is bad, but that's part of it. I mean, Justin Fields is missing open receivers. And a lot of these throws, they're a little off. And the thing is that you can throw the ball a little off to, say, Garrett Wilson, who might bail you out. But, Arian Smith and Isaiah Davis, and, they're not going to bail you out. They're not going to. And so that was a big problem.
Yeah, the depth at receiver is always I noticed that even after the first matchup. And if you can't get your ground game going, and if you're behind from the get-go, it's just puts you in a tough spot, especially with this group.
Yeah. My biggest the thing with going to this game is that it had to have been the worst game, especially as a Jet fan, to watch the entire that entire Sunday. Not even just the 1 o'clock window, that entire day. Probably the entire week, though the week's not over yet, but probably the entire week.
It was.
And the weird thing about going to these games is that you're completely shut out from the rest of the world of football going on at the time. In baseball, it doesn't matter. In basketball, it doesn't matter. But in football, during that window, the 1 o'clock, during the Sunday games, You want to know everything that's going on, and you're just shut out from the rest of the world, and you're just watching this shit show. Like, that was the problem.
It's part of the reason why, Nick D, I have never been to a football game, pro or collegiate, in my whole life.
You've never been once?
No, I almost went last year. I almost went to the Giant Panther game because it was in Charlotte, about 3 hours north of where I am, except that game last summer got moved to Germany, so I wasn't going to make the trip out there. College-wise, I mean, I've got Coastal Carolina not that far away. I actually have a very close friend in one of my bands who invited me to go to the South Carolina game against Oklahoma in the middle of October when I'm on vacation because – believe it or not, a little bit of a fun fact, her son actually plays on South Carolina team. He's a backup offensive lineman, but it just doesn't work out because it's 3 hours west, and then I have to stay at a hotel and then try and come back the next day. So it just didn't work out. But that actually is part of the reason is the fact that you are shut out from all the other games. You know, like this past week, we had 9 games in the 1 o'clock window. And so you're going to shut out from the other 8. The other thing, too, is it's almost like for me when I lived on Long Island, you're almost committing your whole entire day to that game because you got to leave.
If you live on Long Island, you do.
Yeah, and that. But I'm just talking from my experience when I lived on the island for my first 25 years. I would have to leave my house at maybe 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning because I would have to drive there, which I probably would not do. Otherwise, though, I would have to take mass transit, the Long Island Railroad to Penn, take New Jersey Transit out there. And then, you get there, game ends, let's say 4:15 or so. Then trying to get back home, either whether you're driving and trying to get out of that parking lot is either a mess and then takes you forever on the GW Bridge, or you're trying to take mass transit back home. By the time you're probably back home, it's like 8, 9 o'clock. It's like a 12-hour day. And you're shut out from all the other games.
Yeah, you don't watch anything. That's assuming you live. When I got back home, I was able to watch the 4 o'clock games, like starting in the second quarter. But if you live further, then that's going to be really difficult. And that's why I like watching. I generally like watching the games from my couch, and I like going to night games because it's different. It's a standalone game, and I think the environment in night games tends to be a little better. Like
I would agree with you on that, and I think that's especially true in college.
Yeah, no, I've hardly been to any college football games in my life. I went to like a Boston College game one time.
See, that in your situation, it would be tough because where you live, there's not a lot of college football. I mean, there's Rutgers.
There's Rutgers. But
like on Long Island, I had nobody. Otherwise, I'd have to go to like Syracuse or down here. I've got obviously the Gamecocks. I've got Coastal Carolina. I got the Chanticleers. I could go to Clemson. I could go to a bunch of different ones here, but I mean, I've got everything else. I mean, Sunday morning, I work Sunday morning and come home, then go to a bar. I could be at the bar for the next 7 hours watching 12, 13 games over the course of 7 hours.
Yeah. Well, the thing with college is
that the game that I had to deal with this past weekend between Notre Dame and the Giants.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Well, the thing with college is that the environments are better than in the NFL. Like, college fans are crazy and are crazy passionate, but also if you're a student, at least it's not an entire day commitment to go to a game. Or even if you're not a student, if you're staying somewhere that's near I don't think going to a college game is usually quite the commitment that going to an NFL game is. Although there usually are other games going on at the time. You can, like, if you're a student, for instance, and you go to a game every weekend, you go to the game, and then when it's over, you go back to your dorm or wherever you live, and then you can watch the rest of the games. It's not like that if you go to MetLife Stadium.
Yeah.
The commuting factor is much bigger. Yeah. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I've hardly been to any college football games outside of, I think it was a game between Boston College and South Carolina, I think it was, or NC State. And that was like 14 years ago. I think that might have been the last time I was even at a college football game, which is weird because I do a college football podcast and I hardly ever even go to games. I just like watching them on TV. Speaking of college, so Notre Dame, speaking of 0-2, Notre Dame is 0-2.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to talk about the Chiefs being in trouble, being 0-2, Notre Dame in a whole new world of trouble compared to the Chiefs. A whole new world of trouble. And that is just a really tough game. That is just a really, really bad loss. I don't know how much of the game you watched. I watched
pretty much. I stayed up for it all on Saturday night. I was at a friend's house for a barbecue, stayed there for the first half, then came back home and watched the end of it. And yeah, I didn't get much sleep Saturday night, and then turned right back around Sunday real quick. So yeah, obviously, 0-2 and by a combined 4 points, no less.
Yeah.
It's – I mean, there was a lot of good things. They started out really strong. Jeremiah Love, he's awesome as a running back. CJ Carr played better. But there's growing pains with this team.
Yeah.
That's it. They lost, and they lost quite a bit to the draft this past year. And yeah, it's deflating, because like all the talk about the playoff now, how do you have a two-loss independent team with no conference championship get in now?
Yeah.
Last year, the Northern Illinois loss was so bad, but then after that, they ended up Notre Dame after that loss was the best team in the country.
Yeah,
and had some significant wins. I mean, they beat a top 25 team in every month of the season last year. This year, where is that happening?
Well, the thing is, last year, I think they had a really bad loss to Northern Illinois. To me, it was almost like the season for Notre Dame last year reminded me a little bit of LeBron's career. I know it's weird that I'm making it about LeBron, but it reminds me of how, like, LeBron had that terrible loss in 2011. But then from 2011 to like 2018 or something, from like 2011 and for like the next 6 seasons, he did everything right. Like he did everything that he could have done. It was a similar thing with Notre Dame last year. Notre Dame had that terrible loss to Northern Illinois, but they did everything else right since then. And I think people overreacted to the loss to Northern Illinois. People were saying their playoff hopes were over. That's it. It's over for Notre Dame, as if no other top team was going to step in a landmine against an inferior team, and Notre Dame was just finished. And they overreacted. Now, I still don't think Notre Dame is finished. They're not finished. They can still make the playoffs, but it's going to be harder. Notre Dame does not control their own destiny. And the problem with Notre Dame is that they always, every single year, even now, it used to especially be the case when there was 4 teams, but even now with 12 teams, they can't afford to lose more than 2 games. And even losing 2 games is pushing it because their schedule is so weak consistently. They don't play a very good schedule. I mean,
not this year. No, actually, do you have it in front of you?
I have it in front of me right now. You know who the best team they play is for the rest of the year?
Well, right now they have 1 ranked team left, and that's 25th ranked USC. And what is USC going to be like when they play them in the middle of October?
USC is, as of now, the only ranked team that they're going to be playing. I mean, that might change a little bit, but look, maybe they play Purdue next week. They're probably never going to be ranked. They play Arkansas, NC State, Boise State, Boston College, Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, and then on the road at Stanford. It's very unlikely that any of those teams become ranked at any point. So they would end up with their only ranked win being against USC. By the way, it's possible USC, by the time that they actually play, might not even be ranked. So
yeah,
I think they probably will, but you never know. So
at the end
of the season, USC might not be ranked. So Notre Dame might end up being 10-2 with 0 ranked wins, at best 1 ranked win. And that's going to be a huge deal for the playoffs.
And the thing is, too, is are they going to play like they played after the Northern Illinois game where they dominated opponents every game the rest of the way out? I mean, if you look at last year, if you take out that game at the end of the year against USC, the most amount of points that they gave up more than, well, let's include USC. They only gave up more than 20 points to opponents twice. Are they going to have to do that again? They're going to have to do that again. They are going to have to win out, and not only just win out, but they are going to have to dominate their opponents. And I just don't know if they can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, last year, like I said, after the loss to Northern Illinois, they beat a ranked team in September. They beat a ranked team in October. They beat a ranked team in November. And then obviously in the playoffs, they beat one in December and January. And last year they beat a team in August, and they beat a ranked team in August to start the year. So they beat a ranked team every month of the college season last year. That likely cannot happen this year.
And not only that, but when you look at these matchups, Notre Dame only has something to lose. And I think that like some of these matchups are somewhat difficult, but if Notre Dame ends up winning, they're not going to get any credit. So Notre Dame has to go on the road and play Arkansas. Arkansas is not a great team, but you know what? I mean, I don't know what they're going to look like this year, but what I can tell you is last year they ended up beating Tennessee when they played at home. SEC teams are really tough to play on the road, and like they could easily slip up in that game. But if they win, they're not going to get any credit, even though the game is probably a little more difficult than it gets credit for. Same thing with Pitt. Pitt, unless they become ranked, like that's probably not an easy matchup. But they're not going to get any credit if they end up beating Pitt, unless maybe they end up a ranked team. So Notre Dame has matchups that are really not all that. Some of their games are not all that easy, but it's not going to show up on the resume. Like they're not going to get credit for those wins. And given that they're not in a conference, that hurts them because at least if they played in the ACC, which they're like a de facto ACC team, if they were in the ACC, they'd at least have a shot to win the ACC. But they can't do that because they're not in the ACC, they're not in a conference. So that could end up hurting them. What I think really ultimately what it's going to come down to is that it's going to come down to the rest of it's going to come down to, I would argue, the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC. Not so much the Big 10, but the only Big 10 team I think it's going to come down to maybe would be USC. But if they beat USC, they're ahead of them anyway. Or Michigan, I should say. Michigan, like how Michigan season goes, it would be that would affect Notre Dame a lot. But let's say there's 3 Big 10 teams, which is the best case scenario for Notre Dame, most likely. The rest of it is going to be ACC, Big 12, and SEC. If a bunch of SEC teams at the top end up beating up on each other, then maybe Notre Dame's got a shot. If there's only one ACC team that gets in, and only one Big 12 team, then I think Notre Dame's got a shot. But it's possible Notre Dame goes 10-2 and they're left out.
I agree with you. I said that to my friend the next Sunday morning. They said to me, "You think Notre Dame can still get in?" I'm like, "It's so slim. It's more slim now than it was last year."
Yeah.
I mean, the only other thing that you can look at is I think the only other team that had as bad as the day on Saturday was Clemson.
Yeah, but it still wasn't as bad. Now Clemson is 1-2.
I will say this though. I think this is three games for Clemson, and this is 3 underperforming and underwhelming performances from them. Because even the game they won against Troy, they looked awful in the first half.
They had to come back from a 16-0 deficit to beat Troy. Troy always has a place in my heart. I don't know if you remember in 2017, Troy ended up beating LSU. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that, yes.
That was so I always remember Troy for that. Clemson now, look, it's not as bad as it was. Their weekend was not as bad as Notre Dame's weekend because at least Clemson controls their own destiny. Well, maybe not technically, but they can at least if they win, they're probably going to have to win the ACC.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because they haven't looked great. They haven't looked great the first 3 games.
No, they have not. They have not looked great. In fact, I think their loss to LSU, they looked the best.
I agree with you 100%. But that's still not saying much. I mean, so far, Klubnik's not looked good so far. And he struggles against big time opponents. And let's remember too, if you look at Clemson here, they still got to play. I don't know what Florida State's going to be. I mean, obviously they're the 7th ranked team right now. I don't know what Florida State's going to be when they play them later in the year, but you still got to play them. And I'll tell you right now, South Carolina, they always have fits with the Gamecocks. Now, I think South Carolina was also a team that was a huge loser this past week too, losing to Vanderbilt. But I mean, Clemson's a team that can't have a third loss, just like Notre Dame can't have a third loss. Clemson can't have a third loss, I think, and get in. And South Carolina always plays them very, very tough. So this, I wouldn't be surprised if they have one more loss by the end of the year.
Yeah, but
I don't think Clemson's running the table.
No, the thing is, though, if they lose to South Carolina, it's not necessarily going to matter that much if they end up in the ACC championship game. And obviously, South Carolina is in the SEC, so that game is not going to count anyway. And we have automatic bids now, so that game is not going to count for the playoffs. So Clemson at least has that going for them, and their conference is really just not all that strong. Their toughest matchup coming up is for the rest of the season is Florida State. They're not even playing Miami. They're avoiding Miami, which, by the way, is such a design flaw in the scheduling of college football that, like, the two favorites to win the conference don't play each other in the regular season.
I don't get that at all.
That, I think, is a joke. But it is possible. Like, I guess if they end up beating, let's say Florida State ends up with one loss, and that's to Clemson, which I don't necessarily think is going to happen.
Or Miami.
Whichever the case may be. Well, in that scenario, Florida State would get in over Clemson because Florida State would have the tiebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
But if Clemson, for the sake of argument, beats Florida State, what if we have the scenario where Clemson beats Florida State beats Miami, you have 3-1 loss ACC teams.
Are we going to go through this again like we did last year?
That could happen too, and I don't know how that tiebreaker works because Clemson doesn't play Miami, so you can't do the head-to-head.
Well, I think you would have to look at the losses, common opponents, or the fact that Troy game, which they didn't look that great.
No. I'm not talking about rankings. I'm talking about like who gets into the it would all come down to tiebreakers.
Yeah, it'd be a bunch of tiebreakers. Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah.
And but so I think Clemson at least has a little bit more of a shot than Notre Dame.
Oh, and they absolutely do. That I'm not arguing.
And by the way, like I said, I think that a win, I could be wrong about this, but I think a win against Florida State will give Clemson a lot more credit. It would be a lot better for Clemson. Will matter more than Notre Dame beating USC in all likelihood.
And I think also, though, it would depend on how they play. It's the one thing I say about college. It's not only you winning, but it's the way you win. Like if Klubnik has another dud and they have to rally back and they still don't look that great in the process of doing so, it may not matter.
Yeah.
But I mean, like even down here, South Carolina was a bad loss against Vanderbilt, but a lot of people were overlooking that game too. And obviously, the big story with that one is the hit to Lenore's Sellers. I don't know if you saw that, but
I heard about it.
So Sellers.
I barely watched that game. I was mostly watching the LSU Florida game.
Right. No, I was going back and forth with like 3 or 4 TVs Saturday night, but I saw that Sellers was. They took Sellers off, and he was being evaluated for a concussion. It was crazy because if you look at the hit in real time, it almost didn't even look. It almost looked like it was a little like bump on the head like that. But what ended up happening was, so he ends up leaving the field. They bring in their backup, who I believe is Luke Doty. And he rifles off a pass, but they blow the whistle as he throws because they're going to review it for targeting. But it took them like 2 minutes. Like that's something. If you're reviewing targeting, that's got to be you got to have a snap of the whistle and before they even snap the ball and say that they're reviewing for targeting. It took them forever, and he threw a pass where if that was completed and the guy would have ran, then South Carolina would have been right back in that game, and they were down 14-7 and they never rebounded and they fell 31-7.
The problem with college football that they have that the NFL has figured out is that the games go on for too long in college football. Like these games go on forever. And that's a little bit of a problem, I think.
It's hilarious because they actually tried speeding it up. They tried speeding the game up. And then within the last year or two, they included the 2-minute timeout.
Yeah, the 2-minute timeout, their own 2-minute warning. Which
means it's like minor league football, getting you ready for the pros. But if you remember, though, they kind of made college like the NFL because they don't stop the clock temporarily on first downs unless you're inside of 2 minutes in each half. So they were trying to speed it up in that regard because that was part of the thing that always slowed the sport down was the first downs, temporary stoppages to move the chains.
Yeah.
Now they don't do that until you're inside of 2 minutes in each half.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have the 2-minute timeout.
And that's always been an issue. Like just how long the games go. They go on and on and on. And by the way, even baseball figured this out. I mean, baseball, they were able to figure out how to make the games quicker.
One thing they figured out, yes.
Yeah, they figured that out sooner than college football did to make the games go quicker. I mean, some of these games go on for they're 4 hours long. And if you're sitting on your couch and you're there all day, it doesn't really matter anyway. But I just think it's not good for the product when the games go on that long.
And don't you love when you're on TV and you look at the programming guide and it says the game is they have the guide for 3 hours, and I'm like, yeah, you may want to make that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you wonder why it's 3 o'clock and you're waiting for this next game to start and it's not even close to starting yet. But
yeah, I don't like the targeting rules in college. I think they should have and I'm not the first person to bring this up, but they should have they do in basketball, with flagrant 1 and flagrant 2. They should have targeting 1 and targeting 2. I think that would make more sense because I feel like a lot of the guys are getting thrown out of these games with targeting calls that are in no way dirty plays. A lot of the contact is sometimes incidental, and we're not giving them, and we're not really reviewing it fairly because we're looking at it in slow motion, and that's not how it is from their perspective in real time. NFL players don't get ejected for what college players are being ejected for. Why are college players held to a higher standard than NFL players? It makes no sense.
Why? Because they're kids? I don't know.
I think if anything, it should be the other way around. And NFL players are held to a higher standard than college players when it comes to targeting. Wouldn't that make more sense?
You would think, but
what some of these players are ejected for in college is just a regular penalty in the NFL. And that's all it is. And a lot of these plays are really just not dirty plays. And the way it works is that if it happens in the second half, you're suspended for the first half of the next game. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's our show this week. Unlike college games, we know how to keep our we know how to keep our show moving and don't go too long.
Why it's called moving the goalposts.
Yeah, we're moving.
Right.
So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Johnny Montalbano. You can follow us across social media at ETB Network. The network. You can follow the podcast at MTGP ETB. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart, Johnny at Montalbano NY. We'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.